Welcome, everyone, to the 10x Go to Market podcast. I am very excited to have Travis here today. And before I dive in with all questions to Travis, for those of you who haven't been on or listening to previous podcasts, this is an opportunity for folks to listen in on all things go to market. Ask all of your burning questions to some leaders in the space. Hope to get some interesting, spicy debate going. So I'm sure we'll get good conversation with Travis today. And Travis is the Chief Revenue Officer of Merge, has a super impressive background, both in mostly developer tool space, but also at fast growing tech companies, multiple runs, scaling organizations all the way through billion-dollar acquisitions. So Travis is the perfect person to have on today to talk about all things sales and having kind of the more traditional training at PTC, but all the way through startup sales and what that encompasses. So, Travis, so glad to have you here today. Maybe we can start with an introduction to yourself and everything I missed in your background.
No, I think you nailed it, Alexa. So Travis Patterson, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Merge, responsible for sort of all things go to market outside of marketing. I work for an incredible entrepreneur, our team of entrepreneurs here, Shinsi Ding and Gilfig, and they're great execs. And I think we've got a great opportunity at Merge, and very excited for what we're building here.
I'm excited as well. Maybe what we can start with selling to developers. I know now you sell to product folks as well, but you've always sold to technical buyers. I'd be curious for you, what are some misconceptions or some things you've learned on the journey of selling to technical buyers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So technical buyers, developers specifically, are notoriously hard to connect with, right? These folks they're not going to pick up their phone if you cold call them traditionally. So a lot of the traditional methods of getting to a buyer from an outbound perspective, don't work in a traditional way. And so I think it's really important. And by the way, this is a trend that's been going on for like a long time. More and more decisions, especially on the West Coast, and technology companies are pushed down to as low level as possible. And when those get into technical buyers, whether it's a product buyer or whether it's a developer buyer or whether it's a security buyer, for example, they're just hard to connect with in traditional sort of outbounding ways. And so I think one of the things that's really important is that you've got to partner with your friends in marketing, right? And you got to figure out what works to get to these buyers, what works to get to a technical buyer. They won't pick up the phone in a cold call, but what they will do is, they'll read really great content that helps them do a better job at being a developer, right? And so they always want to know what is the latest, in my space and what I'm trying to do. And so you've got to build content, right, that resonates with them. That they'll read that content. Uh, Developers will also use tools, right, that their friends use, and they'll use tools that have a great reputation in the marketplace. And so, I think that's really led to the rise of the PLG motion, and you see that over and over where companies are being successful by putting a free tier in the marketplace and letting developers use that technology, get comfortable with it, get value from it, and then they're engaging with that buyer, to turn that into an enterprise transaction. So the rise of the developer-led buyer has forced sellers to really partner with marketing, figure out what works. What works might be technical content, it might be a PLG motion, it might be getting in front of them at a trade show, right? For example. So do they attend a reInvent, right? Because they're a DevOps type buyer. So those are the types of things that you've got to figure out, and you got to have some nuance around to get it right.
I'm going to go a little off script here, but something that you mentioned is you need to have a very tight relationship with marketing, which is very true. I find that organizations that have good sales to marketing relationships, magic can happen. But organizations where it's not tight and the feedback loop is not strong, that could ruin pipeline numbers and ruin kind of the full revenue engine. So I'd be curious for you, maybe learnings. I'm sure you've seen the good and the bad. How do you make a really good, effective sales to marketing feedback loop? And maybe tactically, do you have weekly meetings? Are you tracking weekly cadences? And in startups, it's even probably faster pace and more interactions than even at larger companies.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, so we track everything here. So we look at really sort of all of our outbound metrics, starting with how many site visitors we have on a weekly basis, how many of those are engaging with us through SEO, how many of them are engaging with us through paid search, how many outbound calls all of our SDRs made in a particular day or week. We're tracking what SDR outbound messages work, right? What's working, and so as it relates to marketing, I think it's really important to figure out what works, right? And really work with marketing to figure that out, what works for your company and your product. So there's a lot of things that don't work. You want to look for those signals in the data that tell you that something is working, right? Whether it's a message to a particular persona that's working really well for you, whether it's a message to a particular ICP or part of the industry vertical. One of the things that we found at Merge is that what worked for us is that when we sold to a particular customer, we would look for all of their competitors, because we found that once we've sold to one company in a particular industry segment, we're able to sort of replicate that message across their competition. And so we really partnered with marketing to say, hey, we have this new customer. How do we get a case study built around that new customer? We work with our SDR team. How do we focus on all of their competitors in this space and message that case study that we just built to drive engagement, interaction with that industry segment. So that works for us. It may not work for other companies, but once we found something that works, it's just really, to your point, you got to partner with marketing, and then you've got to double down on those things that are working well.
Something else you mentioned is trade shows. I know you mentioned reInvent, and actually something I learned from Shensi, your co-founder and CEO, is to really optimize when you go to events and trade shows and make sure that you're not just showing up, you're doing the pre-work. And so I'm curious for you, how do you do trade shows today? And if so, is there kind of is there ways to do them well, and are there ways to not do them well?
Yeah, look, we've, and I think Shensi will admit to this, right? We've made some mistakes on the trade show front last year. We went to some shows. reInvent's a good example. Dreamforce is a good example, where we invested in those shows. We put in all of the pre-work, right? We reached out to all of the other folks that are going to be there, all the attendees, did all the right work to make sure that we had the booth in the right place, and we had the right messaging in the booth. We had the right team on the floor, put in all the work, and then we get there and it's just not the right buyer for us. And so
Mm.
those are tough lessons to learn, but you have to get better from those lessons and find out what does work for you. And what we found, and you mentioned this earlier, our buyer is a product buyer, right? A chief product officer, director of product is typically the buyer for Merge. And so we found that those larger trade shows that might have worked in the past for my previous companies don't really work for Merge, and we need to be focused on product trade shows. Those are more niche, they're smaller, they're more regional. But when we've shown up at them, the feedback's been amazing. The lead flow's been great. It's a great ICP for us, and so we've had to pivot for sure. And that takes really good feedback between sales and marketing, and our exec team as well.
A name of the game of early stage is pivoting and making sure that, not everything's going to work, especially with pipe gen, as you're narrowing in on your ICP, figuring out what channels work. And so making sure you just take those lessons and iterate quickly is so important. Um, I would be curious, you are one of the few people that continue to join early stage Series B companies, or maybe a little later, maybe a little earlier, and then growing with the org and taking it to these bigger organizations. What advice would you give a CRO or a head of sales or a sales leader that's going into an earlier stage company and looking to have the same success that you have over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, look, a part of it is I'm just typecast, right? So I think the market looks at me and goes, "Oh yeah, he's a Series B guy," right? And like, fair enough. And plus, I live in the Bay Area, so there are lots of early-ish stage tech companies that are looking for folks that can be here local in the Bay Area. So those two things I think have drawn me in, and probably a little bit of a glutton for punishment of starting in these earlier companies. Advice would be, I mean, look, I think each person's a little bit different, and so what I would say is, think through what's important to you and then write those down, right? Stack rank them. So what's important? Maybe it's money, maybe it's title, maybe it's city, maybe you want to be in a particular space, or you're looking for companies that were funded to a particular amount, or you're really trying to optimize for equity. So what are the things that are kind of important to you? And then try to solve for those things, like stack rank them and then solve it. Does this fit my criteria? You're a buyer, right? You're buying, the big bet you're making is you're going to invest 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your career with this team, with this company in this space. And so, does it meet as many of the criteria that are important to me as possible? And those will change, as your career progresses. I think the things that I look for, in my 30s are much different than in your 40s and 50s, that the things that you're trying to optimize for. My only other advice would be to lean into your ability, and this is really at any stage of your career, your ability to learn, right? So, and how do you do that? You join a team with really smart people, right? You're always trying to optimize for the talent of the team that you're joining and the people that you're going to be working with. And if you do that, you're increasing the probability of a positive outcome. And when I look back at my career, those situations where I've made the most money and had the most, the best outcomes also are pretty like well aligned with those situations where I joined like the best teams. And so if you can optimize for like joining a really talented team, a lot of the rest of the stuff will take care of itself.
Team is the most important in early stage because product will change, the way you go to market will change. Going down that path on team, what do you look for in your hires and building out the sales team?
Yeah, look, when we're hiring, we're looking for kind of two fundamental pillars to start with, and then a lot of stuff around that. So the fundamental pillars for me are intelligence and work ethic, and the reason those are fundamental is they're things that you just can't change, right? You can't make someone work more intensely or more focused or longer hours if they don't have that work ethic. There's not a lot that Alexa's going to be able to say to get them to have, a better work ethic, right? And if they don't have the intellectual capacity to understand your product, to take a complex situation and simplify it and present it back to the customer in a way that the customer can easily understand and see the value in your product, they're going to struggle, right? And so
Yeah.
there's not a lot that Alexa's going to do or Travis is going to do to change, someone's IQ, unfortunately. And so you're trying to at least what I, fundamentally, I'm looking for folks that would score very high on those two criteria first, and then you're looking for all the things that, everyone else talks about. So grit, determination, sort of, winning culture, all of that stuff. And they're important, but you can help influence some of that stuff. You can't really change much about, IQ or work ethic.
Where do you find these people? Because I think in early stage, we're not at companies like Amazon or Google where there's an always on funnel of folks that are coming inbound. In early stage, I hear, yes, you can have a recruiter, but are you also tapping into your network, doing your own sourcing? And if so, kind of where are you finding these people?
Yeah, listen, you gotta kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince, right? So you gotta, it's everything that you said. So if you have a relationship with a really good one or two really good recruiters who understand kind of what you're looking for, that's super helpful. I've been lucky. I've got a relationship with a few recruiters who kind of get what I'm looking for. They're not cheap, so you also have to make sure that your finance team is supportive of using outside recruiters. You have to do your own sourcing, right? You have to block out time in your calendar, get in LinkedIn, go through, your network and really just, spend time sourcing, right? I met Shinsi because she did direct outsourcing. She found me, right? She reached out to me over LinkedIn. So yeah, you have to do the work. And then you've got to test, right? So it's one thing to say, well, I look for people that are competitive, but how do you test for that, right? And so I always, and I love to geek out on this stuff. Like what are your tests to understand if someone is competitive? What's your test to understand someone's work ethic? And how do you think through those things? How do you ask the right questions of a candidate to elicit the response that gives you that tell that yes, this person has a great work ethic, or yes, this person has a lot of they're high character, right? And so how do you ask the right questions to get the right response to give you the sense that you're hiring the right person after you've done all the sourcing?
It's so true, and I love that you answered Shensi's cold outbound. I think that's a misconception of execs in early stage companies that they'll have a recruiter to help them source. It has to be the hustling of also finding the best talent alongside to get the right people. Uh,
Yes, she'll tell you she's not only our best recruiter, she's also our best SDR. So she's a machine when it comes to sourcing and recruiting.
I just quoted her on that in a first round article. But as a founder, you have to be the best recruiter and the best SDR. You're just always maxing out your LinkedIn requests at all times. I would be curious. You mentioned that you need to evaluate things like you have someone in the door and you need to see, okay, are they a good person? Are they actually competitive? Do they have that level of IQ? What are the questions you're asking? Or maybe it's not even questions, maybe it's a take home assignment or a role play. What are the things that you do or ask to make sure that they fit your criteria and caliber?
Yeah, it is the question, right? How do you test for the things that you're looking for to make sure that, this person kind of fits that? We do a take home, right? So one of the things that we found at Merge it's different in every company, but at Merge, what we found is those sellers who embrace technology and are able to demo our product and really present our product from a technical perspective do better than those that don't, right? So
Oh.
while we will pair you with a really great SE who can do awesome demos, our best sellers are also really comfortable talking about the technology, bringing up a demo, demoing the tech, and so we do test for that. We actually will give them a case study and we give them a few things. We give a candidate, a sales candidate, we give them a login to our demo account. We give them a video of the demo so they can actually watch someone else do it. And then we give them a case study in our docs and we say, come back and you have an hour to ask discovery questions around this case study and present back to us a demo of the product. And so that gives us two things when they do that well, the skill and the will, right? Did they put so the will is, hey, did they put the time in to prepare for this effectively? I don't expect them to be able to sell our product as a
Right.
candidate, but what I can tell is did they do the homework, right? Did they spend the time to actually kind of get themselves up to speed on the product? And then we can also tell comfort. So skill and will, right? Are they comfortable with technology? Are they comfortable doing the demo? Are they comfortable clicking through the mouse around the demo? And are they comfortable asking those discovery questions? And so those people that put the effort in, are certainly going to fare better in the interview process than those that don't. So that's one of our gates and filters that we use.
How much do you lean on references or back channels?
It's a great question. A lot, right? Like, I'll tell you something about references. So, back back channels for sure if you can get them. So anywhere you can get a back channel is going to be better than a direct reference that someone gives you. So if you were to ask me for 3 or 5 references and I give you those references and you call those references, what you're looking for when you call a reference on me is how quickly did those references respond,
Mm.
right? If they drag their feet and get back to you 3 days later, mm, it's a yellow flag and maybe not a red flag. I really like to see when I reach out to a reference and I've got their email and I text them and they respond to me within 30 minutes. Hey, I can't wait to tell you about Alexa. She was fantastic for us. And when can I get on the phone with you? That to me is a much greener green flag than someone who takes 48 hours to respond
That
and
is
says,
such a good point. Oh, it's such a good point. Sorry to cut you off. I'm just point.
how fast do they respond? And of course, if I were doing references on you and you gave me references, I would expect them to be great, right? I would expect everybody to say, "We loved working with her. She's fantastic. You should hire her. I would hire her again." And if you're, but you're look, so that's your expectation going into a reference that that someone's giving you, um, and you're looking for sort of any deviation from that really. And it's hard, right? Because by the time you get to references, you're probably late in this interview cycle. You're probably excited to hire this person. You probably need to get that head count, nailed down. So you have a bias towards listening for the positives in a reference, and you kind of have to train yourself to say, "Hey, what are the negatives here? And am I really hearing something? Am I hearing what I want to hear, or am I hearing something that tells me I've got a potential problem on my hands?" That just obviously comes out better in a back channel reference than in a direct reference.
It's such a good point, and at the end, when you get to the reference stage, I find candidates usually think the process is done, and you're usually at the end, but the reality is what you hear from a reference could be way more important than anything you heard leading up to that point. And I agree with you. I love that point of how fast they get back to you. When I do a reference and someone's like, if someone says, "Hey, why don't you call me?" That's when I'm like, "Hmm."
Yeah.
Like you want to make sure that if you ask exactly, you want to make sure that the person that you're asking for a reference is responding right away. Like, you don't need them to talk to me. Hire them. Like, hire them. We can chat later, but 11 out of 10. Like, that's what you want to hear. And that always correlates with the best hires.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's really important. And also do your own references, right? Don't let a recruiter, even an internal recruiter who, oh, we have a great internal recruiting team here, and they'll say, well, I'll do the reference for you. And while that may save time, I just don't want to do that, right? I would prefer to talk to that person and kind of hear the intonation in their voice and how they describe it versus outsourcing that to someone else.
Yeah. And I agree. The back channels are often more telling than the references if you can find paths. And tech sales is small. You can usually find a path.
Yeah, for sure.
That so, I'd be curious for you, maybe switching gears a little with the last 5 minutes. So you were at PTC earlier on, which was the kind of was it the creators of MEDPIC or early adopters, early users?
I think Medic or MEDPIC definitely came from PTC. Who exactly at PTC was sort of the originator of the acronym is a little debatable. I know where I first heard it. A gentleman by the name of Jack Napoli, who ran the new hire or the training process at PTC. At least during my time, is the first time I was exposed to it back in the '90s. But yeah, I'm pretty certain it was sort of developed and curated out of the work at PTC.
I'd be curious, how have you seen that sales methodology evolve over the last several years? And maybe now that you're at a startup, I'm sure it's a little less rigid and structured than maybe at a bigger company, or maybe not. I'd be curious how you've seen it evolve, as well as what the difference are with holding procedures around sales methodology based on the company size.
Yeah, yeah, good question. So Medic, or it's evolved, right? And so now it's quite often called MEDPIC because we've added a paper process and a competitive dynamic to the original sort of acronym. I think the first thing to really understand about Medic, or at least my perspective on this, is that it's not a process, right? Medic is really just a filter that, if used correctly, can help you objectively view where you are in a deal cycle, right? Like if you look at decision criteria, decision process, economic buyer, and you ask yourself the question, have I met the economic buyer, right? How do I really understand this customer's decision process? Do I understand the criteria by which they're going to make this decision? Those are objective filters that allow you to figure out, where do I have a gap in my process, in my deal cycle? What am I missing? Do I not have a champion? Do I not understand my competitive situation effectively? So it's a great filter to try and objectively look at an opportunity and see where you have kind of gaps and holes, in your sale.
Yep. Do you use it at Merge today?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I use it as a leader. I'll tell you a few things. As a leader, when you're doing a forecast call, it's a it's part of the thing that we have folks fill in Salesforce, and I'll go look at it, and we'll ask some of the same questions over and over, right? Who's your champion, right? Have you met the economic buyer? Do you know what the decision criteria is? What's the decision process and timeline? The beauty of Medic or MEDPIC is that it works really regardless of what you're selling, right? I mean, it's adaptable to selling a car, selling a house, right? Selling enterprise software, whether it's integration software or it's in the sales tech stack. I think Medic is adaptable to most sales processes and certainly most enterprise software sales.
And you're not a frontline manager or second line. You have various kind of direct reports under you as well. So are you still as a CRO getting in the weeds and kind of going through the med pick of each deal, or you kind of rely on your frontline managers for that?
A little of both, right? I mean, the frontline managers certainly take the lead from the CRO. So if I'm not inspecting it, if I'm not staying on top of it, it sort of, my focus on it allows the organization to focus on it. And I know, by the way, like if I come join an organization and I start, bringing the Medic tool set to an organization, you know when it's really getting traction when the CEO and the co-founders are asking questions about, like, who's the economic buyer, and do you have a champion? Because you're getting the other nice thing about Medic is it gives us a common language, right? A common
Mhm.
nomenclature to talk about deals and to talk about opportunities. Um, and so it allows us to communicate a little more effectively about a deal when we all have the same common language.
And I think the best leaders, and in startups all the way up to the CRO should be diving into that and having, because everyone will follow the lead of their boss and their boss's boss and having those conversations. And then it just kind of naturally makes its way down to even ICs within the org to be constantly leading with their thoughts with that.
Yeah, certainly,
Awesome.
certainly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Travis. We covered a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. So thank you so much for being with us here today. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy Austin or
Thank you.
South Central Texas. Hopefully, you guys are getting some good weather down there. And
Yeah. And Travis, actually, are you hiring for anything now? Anything for Merge we should know about?
we're always hiring. So we're hiring sales development reps, BDRs, SDRs. So we're hiring those. We're hiring sales folks. We're hiring really across the board. So if anybody's interested, hit me up on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Travis. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Alexa. Bye bye.